and this great project. IBM is a residency program in Brooklyn. We are in Brooklyn right now at the moment. And with restructuring our residency program, we were also very happy that we could invite alums to continue with working with IBM with a new format that we call the Impact Residence that Sarah just mentioned. And this is just one example of partnerships and tighten relationships between alums and residents. And you should all apply at some point. We will have a new open call up next year in general. But what I really want to do, or why I asked Sarah to say a few words is, it is just so incredible what the organizers did. Thank you so much, Sarah, Amelia, Erica. These guys are incredible. They do this with a low or no budget. They do this amazing work and build this community and build this platform for a community. And this is just mind-blowing. It was also so cool to work with you guys, or still working, and I hope we can continue this relationship. It's super important that events like this happen. And also, on that point, thanks to the IBM team, Roddy, the director, David, the curator of IBM, Joanna. Joanna, you're amazing. She's our development coordinator and great help. But also thanks to Billy, Magali, and Lauren, and also our interns, Misha, Poe, and Michael, who are helping us out, and in general also the incredible volunteers that we have here today and the whole weekend. They're also
Yes, thank you so much to the volunteers, so much.
Without them, I think all of this, and also IBM would not exist. Clearly, no. And I also wanted to say thank you to Chemistry. It was just so amazing to work here. The guys are just super awesome, and it's so important to have a good partner in that sense as well. That is just on the same wavelength and has the same understanding of producing stuff like that. So yeah, thank you, Sarah, Amelia, and Erica for doing this, and please continue what you do.
Thank you for that. I'm all embarrassed, but thank you. Okay, so with no more ado, I'd like to welcome Dhruv and Edwin up to the stage, who are going to present community-based communication networks in Nicaragua's autonomous region. So please welcome them. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, sure. I guess Dhruv will stay down there for now. Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Edwin Reed-Sanchez. I'm the founder of SayCell. It's really great to be here. I was here last year, and I was a little jealous of all the speakers, so it's nice to be up on stage this year. So let me tell you about SayCell. SayCell is a social business that I started. And what we do is we provide cellular solutions and infrastructure in developing regions. So we currently have one installation in a place called Pearl Lagoon, and that's in Nicaragua. So a little bit about Nicaragua. It's in Central America. It's between Costa Rica and Honduras. And so this area right here is where most of the population lives. All those lines that you see are the major highways, but we work actually on the Caribbean side. So we're on this side of the country. So this is the autonomous Atlantic region of Nicaragua. And specifically, we work in the areas of Pearl Lagoon and Bluefields. And this area is an indigenous and Afro-descendant area. Like you could see in the pictures before, there's not very many roads over there, and there's a lot of limited communications in that area. And a lot of the communities are fishing communities. All across the Caribbean coast, there's a lot of small fishing communities that live there, and a lot of them lack basic infrastructure, not only communications infrastructure, but the road infrastructure, and even hospitals, and so even just to get to anywhere in that region, you have to travel by boat, and as you saw, it wasn't really an island. It's on the mainland, but it has a long history of having indigenous communities there, and actually it was a Mosquito Kingdom in the 1800s, and was a protectorate of England. So traditionally they speak English or Creole English, so it's kind of like how Jamaicans speak Patois. They speak Creolized English over there. And culturally, they're very different than the rest of the country. The rest of the country speaks Spanish. They're lighter skinned, mestizos, and on the Caribbean side, they're indigenous people or also mixed with African descendants. And so there's been this big divide between one side of the country and the other side of the country, and this has really caused some issues, some racism, you could say. But just in terms of development, all development efforts have been really focused on the Pacific side of the country, and it's been difficult to get development on the Atlantic side. So they were a protectorate till the turn of the century, and then they were reincorporated back into Nicaragua at around 1903, around there. And ever since then, there's been sort of a divide between the two different cultures, and this happened all the way through until the Sandinista-Contra War, which in the 80s caused a lot of problems in Nicaragua. And I won't go into all the specifics of the Sandinista-Contra War, but one of the outcomes that happened when they brokered a peace deal was that that region was able to get autonomy for their region. So this is one of the political things that they were able to accomplish through the brokering of the peace deal that ended the war in the early 90s. So a lot of people ask me, like, am I Nicaraguan? And no, I'm not Nicaraguan, I'm from Chicago. But so they're like, well, so how did you get first involved in going down to Nicaragua? And I actually was running a music recording studio in Bluefields. It was called Bluefields Sound System. And I went there and I saw the culture there, and it's a mix of reggae music and country music. And I was just really impressed at all this talent there, and I'd heard that there wasn't any recording studio. And a friend of mine, we just sort of went down there. I just graduated from college, and then we had like a couple $100 and a computer and some recording gear, and we're like, well, I guess we'll just try to create our own music studio here. And then we ended up staying there for 7-8 years, and we found out that it was like too much work for us to do all the recordings. So we started teaching people how to do recordings, and we started doing classes. And so it became really a multimedia center, and we started getting funding from the United Nations, and we got funding from other organizations. And so one of our biggest problems, though, was like organizing these groups of people, especially when you got to travel by boat to different places. You got to find a way to communicate with them. And over there, the communication is super, super expensive, right? So the average per minute cellular call in Nicaragua is around 48 cents a minute, which is an exorbitant amount of money for the people that live there. And if you take into account, like, teachers over there make about $200 a month. So this amount of money, a lot of people are spending up to 25% of their income just on communications because there's not very many options. There's 2 options, but in the region that we work in, there's basically just 1 option. And then that's if you have a cell phone service at all. So there's a lot of places in that region that don't have any cellular service at all. And the problem is that the major telecoms don't want to invest in these low-density, low-income areas because they don't think they're going to get their money back. And the traditional way to build networks out there is you build this huge tower. It costs about $200,000 to set this up in these communities, and you won't make your money back if you're talking about communities of 500 people, 1,000 people. It's impossible for these existing telecoms to make their money back. So this is an example of a place. This is called Monkey Point. It's right on the Caribbean Sea, and there's no network coverage here, and about 700 people live in this community. And so another problem is that when you're in these places, you can't call a doctor if there's any emergency. What you have to do is you have to go find someone who has a boat, ask them if they hopefully has gas, otherwise you're gonna have to walk to someone else's house to find gas, and then you gotta get the gas, get into the boat, then go the 2-3 hours to Bluefields until you get to the hospital. So there's really big communication problems over there. This is another place called Punta Gorda. It's in the same region and also doesn't have network coverage. And there's a lot of these small communities up and down the coast where they don't have cellular coverage. But what's really interesting is that even though these communities don't have coverage, they all have cell phones, right? Because at some point, they go into the city and they need to use their phone, or they just take pictures with it, or whatever, you know? And around the world, there's about 700 million users without cellular coverage. So this is one of them. He's looking for a signal. And most of these communities that don't have cellular coverage or lack in cellular coverage a lot of them are indigenous communities or rural communities. And even in the Navajo reservation, they've had problems with connectivity. And even today, only about 50 to 60% of them have access to cellular coverage where they live. And a lot of them don't have access to high-speed internet either. So we work on the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua over there. That southern part of Mexico is also an indigenous area, and there's a lot of areas in the Amazon. All those areas in red are indigenous areas, or equivalent to reservations. And that whole area in Brazil also lacks cellular coverage. So what we propose is that we're creating community cellular networks. And I just need to, iterate that Saycell is not like a traditional cellular provider. The idea of what we do is we help local community governments be able to have their own cellular network, and we just provide the infrastructure and we provide the know-how and the technology. That's all based on open source tools and open source software in order for them to have their own cellular network. So a big part of the process is actually talking with the local governments. And this is one of the meetings, it's pretty dark, but this is one of the meetings I had with the communal governments over there. And each community has their own community government. And so they're traditionally able to do this. So here's a little bit about the equipment we use, and it's actually here right on stage. There's 3 components to this equipment. There's the BSC, which is basically the base station controller, or the computer that does all the logic in order to connect the different parts of the different networks. The BTS, which is the base station transceiver, which is this big guy right here. That's essentially the software-defined radio that allows you to connect to the different phones. And that's produced by NewRAN. And this is the real equipment that's used in the field. So this gets mounted on a tower and is what's really used out there. And basically the third part would be the antennas. So a community cellular network. One of the things that we did was we started working with community radio stations because they have some of the basic infrastructure that we need, which is power, a tower, and a place where we could store the equipment. So you start out at a community radio station, you have your tower, and then you put your BSC, which is the computer, and the BSC connects to the BTS, which is tower mounted, and then that connects to the antennas. So once you have that set up, you're able to provision people on the network, and people are able to make internal calls and talk to each other, talk and text with each other. You can back everything up with a solar panel. You could actually run the whole thing from solar. We do a combination of solar and town power, and power is a real issue because power goes out pretty much 2, 3, 4 times a week. So you always need some kind of additional power source. And in order to get outside of the local network and call my phone or call anyone else, you need an internet connection. So this internet connection allows us to manage the system remotely and also do long distance calls. Later on, I'll get into issues that we've had with the internet, but internet's hard to get there as well. So here's some of the pictures of our installation. And those are some of the big, huge antennas that we had to install. And so the idea is that with this cellular network, the community is able to offer unlimited local calls and text. They can also text everybody on the network. So if there's like a vaccine campaign or news that they want to give to the entire community, they can do that from their, there's an existing portal that each community can use, and Dhruv will show that a little bit later. But yeah, so they can send messages to the whole community, and also it's really important that they're able to have emergency services, and emergency calls, because in Nicaragua, even if you do have a cellular network and there is an emergency number, that emergency number actually gets routed to an answering service in the capital and doesn't really go anywhere from there. And so we did a study and we found out that only about 12% of the people know that there's an emergency number. And not that it really matters because it's not really going to help you. So what we're doing is that when we install these networks, we install a phone like this, which looks like just like a regular phone, in each of the clinics that are in the villages and also in the police station if there is a police station. Currently, if you want to call police in a lot of these areas, you literally have to know the cell phone number of your police officer in order for them to even respond to you. So here we're going to have a little live demo from Dhruv. He's one of the developers that works with CSL.
Hi guys, I'm Dhruv. I'm just going to set this up real quick without breaking anything. Serious? Can you charge it real quick? Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of technical aspects of how we run our network in Nicaragua, and then I'll hand it back to Edwin to talk about backhaul. So in this picture, what you have here are two cell phones connected to this BTS here. So let's say, for example, we have this maybe a cell phone that just died and this emergency network. These phones are connected to the BTS, which is controlled by some software called by the Sysmacom folks called OpenBSC. Yeah, so eventually that signal, once let's say mobile unit A wants to call the doctor who's over here, that signal will be passed through the Linux call router and make a SIP connection to FreeSwitch. And FreeSwitch is a open source PBX, which is sort of like how you, like when you call a doctor's office or something, they might have a PBX where you can, I don't know, talk to a robot for a while. So yes, I guess we'll just demo what that might look like and watch it in our system. So here I am SSH'd into this box, which is the BSC, and as Edwin said, this is the kind of the controller and controls the logic of the network essentially. So Edwin, I think the number is saved. Cool. Yeah. I could find it if you want. Well, while Edwin finds the number, I guess I'll show you guys the admin panel. So something I want to reiterate is what Edwin said is that we aren't a network operator. We want to install the infrastructure and let the communities remain autonomous. So this is an example administrative interface for a community leader who might have been trained by us to use the network. So on it, you can see that the two kind of green guys right here are the emergency line, which eventually will be a 911 number or something similar to that, so people can just dial 911, and Edwin. So yeah, on this interface, you know, you can kind of like community leaders can subscribe users, add credit. And kind of most importantly, send text messages. So let's say there's a weather emergency, or I don't know, really it could be anything. But you can blast messages essentially to everyone on the network if you're a leader to kind of send information that's important. So I mean, an example of that would be I'm sending hello to everyone. And maybe eventually it'll come through, yeah. And the cool thing about this phone is it gets text messages But so yeah, that's essentially the network in a box. I wanted to show you guys how you would make calls out of the network. Yeah. So Edwin's making a call to the emergency number, which is, where they're both connected by this BTS. You got it? Yeah. So here you can see the call. Hello? Yeah, so here you can see the call get routed through FreeSwitch and basically our Python API to talk to FreeSwitch. So we basically look up a dial plan for the specific number and determine whether it's local being whether it's connected to this BTS or whether it's coming from the outside world of phones like you or me. And then we route it. I mean, in this case, it's routed to the Linux call router, and we kind of just kind of patch the signal. But again, what I wanted to show you guys was a call out of the network, which is interesting for a couple reasons, because there's connectivity problems in Nicaragua, as well as the connectivity problems actually in this auditorium. So to actually make a call to someone on an external network, we need to have a backhaul, which is an internet connection, and provide voice over IP. So FreeSwitch could actually route the call through the internet. And without internet, of course, this network is local to everyone here at 10 Ike. But yeah, and I think Edwin's going to talk a bit more about how we're solving the connectivity problems.
All right, thanks, Dhruv. You just leave it there, or not?
Sure, yeah, just switch it.
All right. Da-da-da. Okay, so VoIP, you guys saw the admin portal. So yeah, so there's definitely a lot of challenges working in these regions. The most prominent problem that we have is the internet backhaul. So without an internet backhaul, this means that we can't have any kind of remote management and we can't get out to other networks that are outside our own local network. And just to explain how the connectivity works out there, Bluefields and Pearl Lagoon are about 25 miles away from each other. And we spent a lot of time trying to get an internet connection in Pearl Lagoon, but literally it costs $500 for a 5 megabit connection a month in Pearl Lagoon. And there's a couple providers that are willing to do it for you, but it's an exorbitant amount of money. It's like you can't pay that and expect to actually recoup your money when, your population that you're serving is, a couple thousand people. It's cost prohibitive. But in Bluefields, which is a major city, there's about 80,000 people there. They have their own connectivity problems, and mostly because there's no internet service provider is really interested in doing business on the Caribbean coast. There's one provider that actually does provide internet, and it's the major telecom provider. But where I have my house in Bluefields, which is about a 5-minute walk from the university, I've been trying to get internet in my house for over a year now, and they say that the nodes are saturated, that call back later. And this is true for a lot of people in that region, or in that city specifically. And so they give you this option of a 3G dongle that you can connect into your computer, and that's really expensive too. That comes out to about $2 a day, so $60 a month, and you have a limited amount of internet that you can use. And that wouldn't really work for our system anyway. But that's pretty much the only options that they provide for internet service. And yet, what's really amazing and crazy to think about is that the fastest internet, one of the main internet connections in all of Nicaragua, goes right through Bluefields. And this is it. It just looks like a bunch of containers with a bunch of bushes around it. But this right here is where there's a deep sea fiber optic cable that goes directly to Miami, goes directly into Bluefields, and yet Bluefields has like the worst internet compared to any other city in Nicaragua. And so the problem is that these telecoms, they're really more interested in the Pacific side of the country, so they send the internet via the electrical lines to Managua, and then from Managua they decide to redistribute to other regions. And that causes a lot of latency, and it causes a lot of problems with internet connectivity in general. So this sort of forced us to reconsider what we were doing as a company, and not only try to provide cellular infrastructure for these communities, but we were forced into really having to provide internet as well. So when we registered as a company, we're also registered as an ISP. And the idea is that now we're going to be able to create our own backhaul using long-distance Wi-Fi connections from Bluefields, as opposed to getting these connections from the other providers. And recently, they built a fiber backhaul that goes to Bluefields. So if you see here at the bottom, right here in Bluefields, this is the line that connects to the rest of the network. And this fiber optic network goes all the way through Central America to the Americas. And this is pretty recent that they've made this connection. And it's a lot more reasonable to get access to this fiber optic connection. And here in the north, there's a proposed line as well that they're talking about building, but we'll see when that actually happens. So that's why we've become also an internet service provider. And like I said, we're going to do a 40-kilometer long-distance Wi-Fi connection to Pearl Lagoon. And our other main problem is getting access to spectrum, or licensing to spectrum, right? And so we can't just go down there as a company and say, hey, we're just going to start putting up towers and we're going to be a cell company, without actually asking permission from the regulators. And so the strategy that we're using is that we're using the fact that this is an autonomous region, right? And the people there are indigenous groups, and officially, autonomy gives the communities the right to manage their natural resources. And the idea is that the radio waves and the airwaves are part of their natural resource. And so therefore, legally, they're able to use these resources for what they deem is most important for their communities. And so that's the strategy we're using, and and this is something that's been used before by Rhizomatica. And Rhizomatica is a group in Mexico that actually is running 22 cellular networks, and we work very closely with them and are very actually indebted to them. We share a lot of the same code that they use. And so here's a map of the region in Mexico they work in, mostly in Oaxaca, but they were actually able to get a provisional license from the regulators in Mexico to do everything from Chiapas all the way up to Guerrero, which is like 3-state license to do these kind of cellular networks. And so this has created a precedent of a model that can be used in other countries, which is what we're using in Nicaragua. And we have support from the ITU and Redes, which is a nonprofit that works to get community networks, or to get communications in developing and indigenous regions. And so we work with them, and they're supporting us and really supporting the local governments there that are who are currently petitioning to get their access. So they've had meetings with the regulators in Nicaragua. The regulators know. I guess I got a new message. Let's see what's going on. Maybe I didn't pay my bill. I don't know. Oh no, that's our weather script. So that's another thing we can do. And the idea also is that with this network, we can build tools that are most important for the community. So over there, a lot of them are fishermen. They want a weather script in the morning, know the temperature, know wind speed, wind direction, so that when they go out, they know what to expect. Although mostly it rains all the time, but but we have a weather script that we're able to build, and then automatically it sends out the weather script to all the phones who are connected to our network. So anyway, back to the legal support. The community governments are in the process of getting that licensing from the national government. And this all wouldn't have been possible without the support of NYU and ITP. We currently get funding from them, and also the RISC Econ Lab and the Quran Institute of Mathematical Sciences. So this is partially funded academically. We do research and trying to develop the system more so that it can be more useful and easier to deploy. Right now, when I started doing this work about 2 years ago, it was just a lot of late nights on command line. I'm sure a lot of you guys know about that. And so, but 2 years later, it makes about a little more sense, and we're able to actually, have a real network that works in these areas. So, thank you guys. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. Yeah. There was a mic.
Thank you. You mentioned Rhizomatica, but I'm just curious what other people or groups are doing similar stuff, or like what the other alternatives are to major telecom providers.
Okay. There's a couple groups that actually have create the technology to do this. So there's like Yape BTS, there's Sysmocom, there's OpenBTS, and they all offer solutions that are similar to this. The people that are actually in the field, like actually deployed and doing these kind of networks, I only know of Rhizomatica doing this. They're the most prominent, they have the most installations. There's a lot of other small test installations. And interestingly enough, there's also a new project that's sponsored by Facebook, and it's called a Telecom Infra Project. And so that is it's really interesting and really new. We actually just came back yesterday from California. They had a conference, and they're building an open source hardware that basically would replace this. Well, actually both of these, this and this. And so they're trying to build a community around this open source hardware to make it easier to deploy. And so the group that works at Facebook is a company, well, they got bought out, but they were called Indaga, and there were some researchers from Berkeley, right? Yeah, there were researchers from Berkeley, and they'd been working on this for a while. And they have an installation in Papua New Guinea and also an installation in the Philippines. Traditionally, a lot of the way companies like mine would work would be that we would work on this technology, we would install these networks in communities at our own cost, and then we would make a deal with the existing telecom provider, right? And then we would do a cost share or a revenue share. And so they take a percentage, but we would put all the upfront money to actually do the installations, and we would get to use their licensing. Personally, I don't really want to do that model. I believe that there could be a different model that works sort of from the ground up as opposed to from top down, and working directly with the communities to build their infrastructure. So the more communities we have connected, the stronger our network would be. So even we could interconnect with the indigenous networks in Mexico, right? Because we're using the same software, we were able to use the VoIP connections to connect with them. And so that's the idea, to sort of build the community of indigenous and networks that are not controlled by the existing companies.
Yeah, well, I just want to add that the reason that there aren't so many of these companies or these people doing this is because legally it's very, very difficult to get access to spectrum.
Yeah.
And with working with these indigenous communities and the fact that there is legal precedent for airwaves as natural resources, we're able to do it. And that's how the Rhizomatica folks are also able to get their network so successful in Mexico. There's similar rules about that in the States as well. There are community-run networks in Native American reservations as well.
Hi, yeah. First of all, this is really awesome, and thank you so much for sharing all this. Just everything what you're doing is really, really cool. I'm wondering, since you talked a lot about how this is being done in a super cooperative way with these indigenous communities and under the, in some ways, auspices of Nicaraguan regulators, and less a little bit about what adversarial relationships might exist in those places, because one of the things that I'm wondering about is like, it sounds wonderful to like connect indigenous communities, and then indigenous communities tend to experience this like, and now we're going to be silenced by some not indigenous communities. And have you thought about resilience against that sort of thing? Do you run up against that sort of thing? What's been your experience adversarially with like these larger governmental orgs, if any?
None yet, but we expect at some point, if we were big enough, that really the complaints would come from the existing telecoms, right? Not really the government, because really the government is supposed to provide infrastructure in all areas. And so whenever we've talked to government officials, they're always like, yeah, that sounds great. We need to do this, right? Yes. And then it's just a matter of actually getting it done, which is a long bureaucratic process. So really that's the hardest thing, is the bureaucracy of this. I mean, like, they still write everything by hand. Everything gets typewritten. And it's just a really, really slow process. But in terms of the government, at least, even locally and nationally, we haven't had any conflicts yet. So. What? But we're not big enough, though, to really have a problem with them at this point. You know, it's just some small community that they don't see as really making that much money from this area anyway. There's outages all the time. It hasn't become an issue yet. But you know, we're not sure, not yet.
Hey. I work with the Internet Society, so I wondered whether you worked with the Internet Society, and specifically whether you attended the Caribbean Peering Internet Forum in Barbados in June, or whether you deal with people like LACNIC, Caribnog, those kind of people.
Not yet. We haven't dealt with any of them. The only thing we've done is try to get access to the fiber backhaul in Nicaragua, but nothing specifically like that.
Can I ask you to come and talk to me afterwards?
Sure. Great.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.